That's fine. So this discussion is about mobility. So specifically, we're going to look at the Mobile Development Kit, which is one of the toolkits that SAP are providing for mobile development. Everything that you do with the mobile platform, I guess the mobile platform is the baseline for what we're going to do with the MDK and also for any of the SDKs that SAP will give you. So I guess the prerequisites for a lot of this stuff is to start a journey into the cloud platform. Now, when Nick was talking before, he was asking, when everybody has been looking at the cloud platform, and we've got some hands, which is great. If you haven't been down that path, I encourage you to do that, and there's a lot of ways you can do that now, particularly through SAP's demo systems and your trial accounts up on the cloud platform. So all of the services, including the mobility services, which we're going to look at today, are available as part of the demos. As part of the trials, so you can just get in and start sort of getting familiar with the tools of what you can do. As a baseline for mobility, the SAP Cloud platform itself, it does a lot of infrastructure stuff. So it's sitting there as your connectivity to your back end, so through your SAP Cloud connector, and also obviously through the setting up of destination services. On top of the cloud platform, you've obviously got the mobile services, which is where you start going through the process of defining the attributes of the app you're going to build. Now, they're not functional attributes in the sense of what it does from a business perspective, but they are attributes around how often the app gets updated, what the security protocols are on the device, and the sort of authentication you need against the whether your IDP, your identity process, whether you have a PIN number to lock out the app, sort of doing remote wipes, that sort of stuff. So more capabilities of that, and it also manages the life cycle of the application on the device. So, for example, as a dev shop, I'm pushing out new releases of my app. I can force you to take that when it's available. So you don't have a fleet of devices out there with an old version. So that kind of keeps everything up to date. So these attributes are then maintained through the mobile platform itself. So every app can be different, and every app can have different rules depending on what it is. And those are then configured through mobile services. One of the other key things that I guess mobile services does for you is that it offers things like offline capability. So all the functionality around replication of offline data is a key capability of the SAP Mobile Services platform. So once upon a time, if you're building a mobile application, you had to give a lot of thought, particularly if you're doing an offline app. Now a lot of that's managed for you. You are connecting to data in your back end or through the web using OData. So if you're familiar with writing OData services for mobility, for Fury, it's the same process for mobility. You're calling an endpoint or endpoint service. That data is replicated to a local data store on the device. Programmatically on that device, you then access that data using the similar OData calls, but it's just running locally against the local data store. And then there's a replication process that is managed for you through the frameworks that SAP provide and the platform itself. So you don't have to sort of get into the nitty-gritty of offline management, conflict resolution, that sort of thing. And from a programmer's point of view, you actually don't care whether you're writing against your server or against the local data source. You're still making your get against an entity set, and that's what you're showing on the screen. I guess the key point is that SAP Cloud Platform and mobility services underpin a lot of this. So then if we move on to the Mobile Development Kit itself, okay, so I should ask, has anybody done any mobility work in this space before I jump up? Yeah, Andrew's done some? Okay, yep, great. All right, so I've done some as well. So SAP have probably been releasing SDKs to work on top of the mobile platform for probably the last 3 years. They started with Apple, and they wrote an SDK for iOS. The reason that these SDKs were built, and I guess SAP like to provide us with tools to help us do what we do. Sometimes they work well, sometimes they don't. But we've all had those sorts of stories. But they went into a partnership with Apple, and they also wanted to provide a way for developers to follow the Fury design, the UX patterns that we're all doing already with UI5 development. So as I transitioned from desktop to mobile app, I wanted a similar experience. So what SAP did was they wrote a library, an SDK library for iOS, which used the Fury design patterns on top of native iOS controls. They bundled that up into an SDK. So that was the Fury part of that. They also delivered the integration back to the cloud platform, the OData service protocol, so all the mapping in and out of the OData objects, the offline data replication. So it became a sort of a full feature framework that you could use as a base for them building your applications. So you'll get that sort of continuous Fury pattern, sort of Fury design language across your entire organization, even when you get mobile and offline. The SDKs, I guess, were accelerators for that process. Obviously, Android is probably supported more in the enterprise than Apple to a certain degree, particularly in the maintenance fields and that sort of stuff. We have a lot of, we've got a lot of truck drivers that are using Android devices. So, although SAP done work with Apple, Android was where people wanted to go. So SAP then put together, worked with Google, did the same thing with Android. So there's now two libraries. There's an SDK for iOS and an SDK for Android. They're not quite at feature parity, but they're close. And obviously, although they follow the Fury guidelines, they also have the nuances of the platforms themselves. So if you're used to navigating around an Apple device, the navigation is the same, similar with an Android. Excuse me. The MDK then came along because of the idea of write once, run anywhere, right? So people don't like supporting multiple platforms. Sometimes you have to, and we'll get into that with the MDK itself. But at some level, you can write a generic application that is then capable of running on both devices. Now, in this particular approach, they haven't gone with a containerized approach like Cordova, where you would have a native container and then you would dump a web app in it. What they've done is they've written a framework based around native script that will actually convert your metadata definition of your application, which is your XML, which describes your view, so your declarative view definitions. Once again, very much like Fury. If you've done Fury development, this will look very similar. And JavaScript for rules. And then that is then compiled down into a native app for iOS and a native app for Android using those SDKs, which they'd already built. So you end up with a native application, but it's native all the way through. It's not native with a web component inside. So, and it's using those frameworks. So that whole, layering of components is involved. It also means, and we'll touch on this as well, that at some point when you need to extend your application, so the problem with going common, if you like abstracting up the stack, is that at some point you're not going to recover all the controls. So if Android's got 10 controls and iOS has got 14, the minimum controls across the lot you have is 10, right? So at some point you might need to do something different. So you can then do what's called an extension, and you can build something natively in the device you require and include that in your MDK application. That actually allows you to drop down into either the iOS SDK or the Android SDK and build a control that maybe you didn't have in the common platform, or go totally custom and build something very specific to what you're trying to do and put that in the application itself. And the way that they've done that is they use there's some interfaces that you can include in your build, which allows you to pass data in and out of that control. So it becomes a completely interoperable piece of the application you're deploying. The caveat to that, of course, is that just like the Fury client, so if you're using the SAP Fury client to host your Fury Launchpad, just like that, if you're getting that from the App Store, it's already compiled for you. So if I'm writing custom controls, I cannot get those into a compiled application. I do have to go down the path of building my own client, and the MDK SDK provides the tools for you to do that as well. And that's not a complex process, and it gives you a little bit more flexibility. You can certainly apply different icons and themes and all sorts of things that you need to do. So considering you've only got 20 minutes left, I will go into some detail. So what I want to do is just go through the process of, if you wanted to build an app, what you would do so you can get started, and then possibly talk through some of the things that you might want to do with application and the sort of tools that are involved in building mobile applications with the Mobile Development Kit. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them during or whatever, so if something doesn't sound right or you want to pick something up, please yell out, and given the amount of time we've got, it's probably better for a bit interactive anyway, so if anything comes up, just holler out. So building a mobile application, this is where you would start. So this is the Cloud Platform Mobile Services, and this is where you come off SCP. So if you go into your SAP Cloud Platform, go to your Mobile Services, and you'll be presented with this screen. What this allows you to do is create either a native hybrid application or the SAP mobile cards, which is also a very cool topic. Phil might talk about that another day, because I know he's done some work in that space, and that's a pretty cool area as well. In this case, we're going to create a native or a hybrid app, and we come in here. Hopefully that's going to work. Yep. And we create in the application. Now this provides you with a bunch of configuration templates. So these are the different sort of mobile applications that you can create on the mobile platform. So native is when we're actually using the SDK, so it's a fully native iOS or Android application. And then there's some different variations. So hybrid application is like your Cordova with a web container in it. A web container is exactly that. It's actually a browser-based app, but it does have a link into mobile services. And there are some reasons why you might want to do that. SAP Fury is if you actually want to build a wrap around a Fury Launchpad, build your own client, or one of the things you can do with the SAP Fury client, is anybody using the SAP Fury client to host their FLP? No? Okay. Yeah, good. Okay. So one of the things that you get with the mobile platform is native push. So I can push messages out to my applications, right? But if I just take the app from the App Store and give it the URL to my Fiori Launchpad, there's no way to push messages to that. But what I can actually do with the mobile platform, if I was to create a SAP Fiori application, is I can actually proxy the call to the FLP Launchpad through mobile services, and that way when the device is initially registered against the cloud platform, it's at the mobile services level, not just directly against the app. So I actually have a registration that I could then push out to. So when you're doing things like the Fiori notifications, which come up in your top right-hand corner, you can also send them out as push messages to your native devices. So that's a really nice additional thing you can do, and that works with the out-of-the-box, the App Store Fiori client, because they've already done all the registration with the Apple Push service and the Android service. So that's kind of cool. And the last one we've got here is the Mobile Development Kit, which is the one we're going to do. I'm just going to do a quick, I've got one already sort of built up. I just want to go through the process here. So this is just going to be demo.sit. Test, let me do that, save that. And then that's going to create an application definition, and there's going to be quite a lot of information here. So particularly around these signed features when that finally comes up. This is using the trial service. It's occasionally a bit slow. So this is where we can set lots of different pieces about how we want our app to behave. So the app updates is all about the metadata that I push to it. So when that application receives its changes and whether or not I have to send those to it and what version we're on. Client policies are more around the device itself. Eventually it will come up. Yep. So do I enable a passcode? I'm going to turn that off right now because I'm going to demo this and I don't want to have to get stuck typing passcodes in. But I can set a passcode policy, how many digits, what sort of level of security I want at that step. There's also places here where I can say whether I want to use biometrics, whether I allow face log on for a device, that sort of thing. So I can provide some control. And once again, this is at an application level, so each application can be done differently. The other one that at this point in time we're going to need is connectivity. So you're generally going to be connecting these things to the back end. So this is very similar to what we do with our setting up destinations in our cloud platform for our UI5 developments. So in this case, I'm going to create a connection. I'm just going to steal this URL. So the service I'm going to use is just the trial service. So the cloud platform has a trial service already built. So it's got some data in already. So it's just going to create a template for this. So I'm just going to create a mobile destination, because that's what we're doing with a mobile device. Paste the URL in here. Tricks for new players. The proxy type in this case is internet. If you are going to the back end through the cloud connector, it's on-premise. So if you hit on-premise, it'll try and go through the cloud connector. So if your connection is outside, make sure you set it's internet. And then there's just a lot of next going on here. So that will generate the connection. And they'll create a connection for us. We just ping that to make sure that works. Now when you're in here, you can actually have a look at the data. So they'll actually make an OData call now to that service and tell us what entities are available. So as you can see, this demo service has got a whole bunch of stuff. So products are something we're going to look at a bit later, and you can see there's some data there. So that's the service that we're going to start building our application against. At that point, we've actually got a application definition in the system. So we could actually connect to that. So what I'll do is I'll show you. So the other side of this is onboarding your device. So the application itself is specifically, so rather than the Fiori Launchpad, obviously, where it's a container and I've got a whole bunch of tiles, I've got access to a whole bunch of apps. Things like MDK apps, native apps are very single focused, so it's an app for a particular purpose. Now, it might have different back-end services, but the app itself is tied to that application definition. So when I go into APIs here, I'll see that there's a little QR code. Now, when I'm using the App Store provider one, so the one SAP provides, it basically takes a long URL string telling it what the app name is, what the OAuth key is, a whole bunch of information while you're on board. But when you first get the app, and hopefully this will come on, I can just use my phone. Come on, phone. So I've got the mobile services app. This one here, this has just come straight from the App Store. And what I can do is I can just use the camera, just quickly take a photograph of the QR code. And that will then open that up in mobile services. And I can start. And that will take all the parameters, so you can see there's the server definition, everything here, plus the actual app definition I've done, and actually bind this application now to that application definition. So it's going to ask me to log on. It's going to log on to my cloud platform, which is that one. Log on. And then what I should get, and I've turned off the PIN, so it's not going to ask me for a PIN. It's probably going to ask me to do the end user license agreement, because that's something else you can turn off, and obviously you can configure for your own purpose as well. Hello, yep, get rid of that. And then that's where we get. So that's the shell application. So that what we've got right now is that's an app with no metadata, no definition. Yes, Ben, go. Oh, sorry, do I hide that? Sorry, my bad. So you get to that point. You shouldn't be able to. It's like, where's it gone? So what we've done now is we've connected the application directly up to the device. So what it's doing now is it's talking to the endpoint. It's saying, okay, I'm a registered app. Do you have any application definitions for me? Which it doesn't, because I haven't created one yet, and we'll do that next. So what I can then do is if I go back to the Web IDE, so the beauty of the MDK is that you don't have to be a Swift developer. You can just use the Web IDE the way that we all do with Fury and all those sorts of things and start building applications that way. So what we'll do is in the workspace here, we'll just create a very basic empty project, because all we just want to do is test how this all sort of sits together. So I'll just call this test sit. Next. This will take a second to build. And this will just build a project for us. It's the beauty of working with trials, although it's good, they're a little bit slow at times. Okay, so let's close this one up. So what it does, at a basic level, it's going to build this application. So it's going to set up this scaffolding here. So there's the main concepts in MDK are actions, which are things like closing a page, logout. So it's sort of just doing stuff. Pages themselves, which are the visual part, and rules, which are the JavaScript pieces. And there's a few other things as well, but they're the main pieces that you're going to work with. So we have a look here. It's just created this main page. Now what the Web IDE does give us is sort of a WYSIWYG kind of editor. So I can have a look over here, and I can see that there are different sort of controls. So there's tables and object collections. And these are the things you would then start to bind to your OData services to show some data. Just for the sake of demo, what we'll do is we'll just put a little button table in here, and then we can grab a button. Where's a button? Section button here. Just call that test. Just so it seems to be changed. And the other thing that here is it's like events. So just like any sort of application language, and a button has an event. We can then say what happens when that's pressed, and that can call an action or that can call a rule, depending on what you want to do. So as the actions are kind of pre-canned things, like maybe close a page, open a page, synchronize data. Rules can do the same thing, because a rule can be coded to call an action, but it can also do a whole bunch of more complicated stuff. So what we will do, if we actually want to start building an application, we can just save this off, and then we just deploy that to the cloud platform. So we just do MDK deploy and activate, hit next. Now the key here is this bit here. So the application ID is the one that's come from the mobile services that we just looked at. So when I build my metadata in Web IDE, I can actually deploy that to any application I want. They're not, what's in the built app and what's the app itself aren't tightly coupled in that sense. It's what's deployed at the time. So at this point in time, I'm going to deploy what I just defined to that demo application. And what they'll do is it goes through a little bit of a process, and you'll see the script running down there. But it bundles it all up into basically some sort of compressed file. It sends it up to the cloud platform. And then what will happen is next time the mobile application actually makes contact with the cloud platform, it'll say, hey, I've got a new definition of application here, and you can take it down, and then you'll see. And so we'll see what happens when it does that. Because we're probably not going to get a lot of time to get into it in too much detail, the Web IDE here is a great place to start, and that's where I would suggest you go if you're going to start working with the mobile app. And it'll give you the ability to sort of start putting things together, learning about the controls. One thing you'll learn is that there are only 2 page types in an MDK application, so they've been very, what's the word? Descriptive. They've been very explicit in what you can do with a particular page type. So there's basically 2 types. One is a form, which is a data editing or data creating type page, and one is basically an overview page. So it's what they call a section table, and it looks and behaves pretty much like an object page, which we've done with Fury, and it's for displaying data. So one for about the object, and the other one for maintaining the data. So you see down here at the bottom, it's deployed the application, and we've now got revision 1. So if I go back to the application here, I'll get this back up. I'll just close it and open it again so that it knows that I've been triggering it. And it should say, do I want to confirm? So it's asking that it's recognized as an update. So I'll just hit OK. And then basically what will happen is you'll see the screen change and we get our content. So what that's done now is it's deployed the definition that we've done on the Web IDE that we've deployed up to the server down our application now. So now our native app is taking on the behavior that we've built in the Web IDE. So that's kind of the basic idea of the MDK. So that would be the same behavior if you'd also done an Android one. So there's an Android version up in the App Store, in the Google Play Store, or if you built an Android version as well. But it's all based around the application you build in the Web IDE. I'll tell you what the next place to go is, considering we haven't got very long. So the other thing that I think you're going to find is that as you start building applications, you're going to have to start doing things like troubleshooting and debugging. Now, one thing you can't do in the Web IDE is actually debug. Okay, so that's where you start looking at, there's another tool set which is the Visual Studio Code. And they also have MDK add-ins, which allow you to do a whole bunch of additional stuff there for debugging. It allows you to attach to the device that's attached to your laptop, or you can use the device simulator. So if you've got an Apple device, you'll have an iPhone and an iPad simulator. If you install Android services, Android Studio, sorry, you also have access to all the Android emulators as well. So you can start doing your testing that way. Just before we go on, I will build another app here quickly just to show you how easy it is to actually get started, because obviously an empty project means that you're going to go and start doing the whole thing yourself. Now, if you've already got an OData service, and you know that we had created an OData service before, which is the products one, what I can actually do is I can actually say, there's other templates here. So these are templates provided by SAP, similar to, once again, what you'd see if you're building Fiori apps. So if I build a list detail application, you'll see that the wizard is a little bit different. So if I go through and do my, what am I doing here? Sit list detail. And we step through this process. It's going to ask a couple of different questions. So the first thing it's going to say, it's going to ask about the service, because now it's actually interested in data. So we'll just call this service because it just needs to be a name. We'll check that service. Actually, I'm going to change that. So I'm going to go against this one, which is my other definition. That application I've just changed that to is actually the same as one we've just done, but I've got that tied into a native built one as well. So it's just a little bit easier to demo with. And you see here it's now offering up all the entities that it's found at the end of that service. So if we want to build an app where we want to see products, so let's say we want to give our people something and we can look at products. So what I can do is I can say, okay, I'm interested in the products data set. This part over here, what it's going to try and do is it's going to try and build some screens which are kind of useful. Generally, you're going to go and change those, but I could set different fields based on the attributes coming from the entity. It also does some work. The page builder is actually annotation aware as well. So as you start working against CDS endpoints, the annotations that you picked up there will start coming through to the MDK for things like field descriptions and binding. So we just do the products one at this stage. So it's going to tell us, okay, the data set is products. There's the basic report it's going to run to get the data. So there's the concept of a setup transaction at the start, because what needs to happen whenever you're dealing with OData and offline OData is that it needs to build a database on the device. Now, the database on the device is purely constructed based on the metadata of the OData service. And one thing you'll find, or certainly my experience anyway, that if you're working with gateway services, you can kind of, if you haven't quite been complete with your metadata definitions, you can kind of hide it a bit with NABAP and working with the gateway. It doesn't work with the MDK if you haven't done it right, because it's going to be trying to make inserts and things purely based on metadata. So, and you can't influence that through code. So, defining relationships correctly, defining cardinality, that sort of stuff is pretty important when you start building databases based on the MDK. So that'll go through. The other thing it's going to do is it's going to create a service. So that's the initialize offline data service. So that's that first part that's actually going to go and say, well, okay, when I first connect, I've got data to get here. I'm going to download the products to the database, and it's going to use that query we saw to actually build that first data set. Now, obviously, if I've got 1 million products, I probably don't want to build them all to the device. So there's a couple of things I can do. I can provide filters at the device end through the query definition, so it's fully OData compliant. So I can do expand, I can do filters, I can do selects, I can do all the stuff that I can do with OData. Or on the back end, obviously, I know the user that's logged on, so if there's roles or anything governing the data that you can get, I can limit the data set that way as well. So I'll just let that run down and create that application. So that's just building all the template up. When the app is up, we'll have a quick look at the application, because you'll start to get a bit of a feel for the way that these things work when these products are built with a bit more complexity. So the list detail one here is going to have a bunch of extra actions. So I'll have some baseline service actions. So these are all about dealing with the database. So we've got things like close offline action. This is just a canned OData action, but that just closes the service off and shuts the database down so that it's closed up, because the database is open when the app starts and closed when it's not. One of the reasons it needs a close action is because if you're updating the app definition, before you can do that, you've got to close the database. So it just uses these actions for different things. These actions all have what are called common properties. So if an action fails, it will actually run a failure action. If it's successful, it will run a success action. Now, they can be as simple as just showing a message, something's gone wrong. They could be a rule. We can do all sorts of stuff. We can send you into a process of dealing with conflicts in data synchronization, that sort of stuff. download action, getting the data to the server. We've got the initialization action, which happens once, so that's when the app is brand new and when we need to establish the database. And also the upload action, which is bringing the data the other direction. It also provides you a couple of close page helpers, so they're just for closing pages, modal or non-modal, and some navigation actions. Now, the reason we have the navigation actions is because you look at the app definition now, it's got a little bit more in it. So if you look at our main page, which is the one that is built up at the start, it has a products button on it, because once again, this is just the template that SAP's providing for you, but it basically builds a button for each entity, and you see it has a press handler. So we click on that, we can navigate to the action. The action is a navigation action, which navigates us to the list page. This is a list of products. Once again, here's all the things we bound to the product. So this is like an object table, if you like. It's got 5 or 6 different, where's the one I need? Object table, sorry, properties, my bad. You see here there's a whole bunch of things I can set, so description, image. There's about 6, 7 different places where I can put data. It's using the binding syntax. You see the curly brackets, once again, very much like UI5. So you'll find a lot of similarities in that as you get into it. And you can obviously write rules as well. So if you're trying to build complex, representations there, you can do that as well. These lines will then have a navigation event, which is this guy here on press. On press here, once again, opens a detail page. And there's your detail page there, which looks a bit like your object page. Because it's OData, it's also binding at the, what's the word? So I've got an entity list. When I click on that, I'm now on the single entity. So it's the classic OData pattern. So, it's entity bracket quote, the ID bracket quote. So the page, the detail page is bound to that. So it knows what specific entity it's reading from the database to then map that data to the page. So what we'll do, just while that's there, we might just deploy that up to the server. Same thing. So I'm just going to deploy this to that particular app there, and then I'll just onboard that application again, and then we should see something totally different with any luck. Actually, I can do it locally. Can I do it locally? Yeah, should be able to do it locally. So while that's running, we talked about the fact that you may need to build your own client. So part of the MDK comes with an SDK, and the SDK allows you to build your own version of the client. So it allows you to build an Android project or an iOS project. Building a project is really straightforward. You basically create a folder with .mdk project on it, and you need 2 JSON files. So the first one is just about, this is for building the application, so that's the bundle ID of the application, and some additional stuff you need if you're including external libraries. And then you need this settings file. Now, if you have a look in here, that's the app ID we looked at before, so that's the org.app.sitml, so that's the reference up to the app server. These URLs here are the ones that are hidden behind that QR code that we scan. So those are available on the cloud platform, but when you build your app, at this point in time, you're baking in those connections into the app itself. So I basically grab those from the cloud platform and I build this JSON file. And then what I do is in the SDK, sorry, my bad, I've just written a little shell script, but there's a little create client command, which is just a command that I can execute on my Mac. And I tell it which project to use, which is the SITML project, and it will build up the application, it'll build the iOS application, it'll build the Android application, and we're all ready to go. So that's finished deploying now. So what I can do is where that was built was in here. So here's my SITML application once again. Builds these 2 apps on the platform, so an Android platform. So there's a fully built Android application, which I could turn into an APK file and give to my Android users. There's your iOS application. If I open this up in the workspace, I'm a little bit freewheeling here, so hopefully this will work. So this just opens up. So this is a fully built Xcode application. Should be able to build that and then run that. And then that'll do the same thing, but rather than looking at being onboarded as I did through QR code, the app itself has all those links in it. So the simulator will start up, and it should ask me to log in because I'm running locally. Or maybe I've logged in already. Comes up in the simulator. The reason this is handy is because, and this is one thing you'll find with the MDK, is that you get started on the web ID and you build some stuff, and you get so far. And then you want to do something a little bit more tricky, like you need to debug, so you drop into Visual Studio Code, write some JavaScript rules, then something doesn't quite go right, so maybe you run the app in Xcode and you get a different trace there, and so there's all sorts of interesting things going on. Let me just log in. So this is now talking to the cloud platform still, but because I haven't run it locally, it's logging in again. So it's going to go. So that should now ask me if I want to bring down the current version of the application. So that's a blank app right now. Confirm that. Now it should bring down. So it's now brought down the. See the downloading and everything's going on. So that's it talking to the database. So now what it's doing is building the database and it's replicating the data down from SAP, downloading, waiting for data from the server. So downloading the data. You can see the little log down here. You can see the data going backwards and forwards. So now what it's done is it's taken that other definition, the products that we built. So if I click on products now, I should get a list of products and a detail screen. So that's offline, right? So that's offline. It's replicated the data down. What I can now do is start doing things with that app project. So I could actually maybe add an extension to it, do all sorts of stuff to it. I can work locally in Visual Studio Code has also got a plugin. So for example, there's a project there. That doesn't exist, so I killed that one. File open recent. One we're working on already. Once again, it looks exactly the same. You can see the breakdown, pages, rules, services, that sort of stuff here. It's not a WYSIWYG environment, which is why I find that I work in both. So if I'm trying to do some screen stuff, I'll probably start in Web IDE, drag and drop, get a bit of a feel, then bring it down here, because the first thing I'm going to do is start writing rules and going, why isn't it working? Then I need to jump and debug. So what I can do is I can kick it off in debug mode, run the app, and the app will run the simulator on the device, and get a breakpoint, I can find out what's going on. And this little guy here, this is where you start. If you work with Visual Studio Code, this would be familiar, but I can set up, when I do debug, where's the app I'm running and all that sort of stuff. And there's also, in the command palette in Visual Studio Code, for those of you, there's a whole bunch of MDK-based rules, which allow you to do stuff like create a new project, create a new page, so all that sort of stuff as well. So they have brought in a whole bunch of helpers, but once again, it's not visual. If you're trying to build a page, for example, it looks like that, and that's great, but maybe it doesn't help you, so it's not easy to work in XML and JSON, so start with the other one, copy paste, bring it down. So I guess to finish, because we're at 5 plus 4, so I said to Phil I would try and finish by 4. If you're interested in doing mobility and you want to get started in the MDK, it's a very easy way to get started. It does get you to, if you look at this app here and you have data available either through an existing OData endpoint that you've done with UI5 or something you want to create, and you want to put it in somebody's pocket offline, really easy, right? You give somebody that in 30 minutes, seriously, and they're going to think, wow, But then they're going to say, oh, can I have a map and can I have something else? And that's when it gets a little bit more complicated. So, because it is quite an opinionated framework, that was the word I was looking for, opinionated. Because it's quite an opinionated framework, they say to you, I've got this overview page, but what I really like down here is, some buttons. They're not there because they're considered edit. So there's things that it just won't let you add them. You just cannot physically do it, and it won't compile if you tuck them in. So you have to think about through the pattern. So maybe that's where I'm going to add in an additional custom control, or have to really think about what I'm doing with the app. So, and at some point, it gets too hard to say, well, maybe there's the right way to go, but we might drop down a level to the SDK rather than the MDK. But as a starting point on a mobility journey, you don't have to bring Swift, Java skills with you. It's a bit of JavaScript. You can drag and drop in the Web IDE. You're probably already familiar with that environment. It gets you started really quickly. And the fact that it's offline, and it's pretty much, it's offline by default. You have to actually tell it not to be offline, so that's the way it'll go. Just to finish, Phil, there was an announcement about 3 weeks ago about this thing here. I don't necessarily think it's magic, and we're going to make our own decisions on it. But it's what they're calling the transactional bridge, and this is the way they're trying to accelerate adoption of things like the MDK. So, an example that I think they use is accessing HR data, which probably isn't a good idea, but anyway. So rather than, if let's say you've got no OData services, maybe you've got no gateway, you just don't do that stuff. The transaction bridge actually allows you to effectively record a transaction through, it's an application that's running on I think it's on Cloud Foundry rather than Neo, but whatever. But you can say, oh, look, I want to run IW33. I want work order. I'd have 33 work orders, right? Work order list, right? Or work order. So I can actually record, opening up a work order and creating it, and it will actually generate an OData service against that, and the metadata, which I can then use to build the app. So I can then give you the app and say, here's an app that lets you access work orders, and I haven't actually had to go into Gateway or write any OData. So, worth a look. We all love these recorders, right? But anyway, but that's really, so SAP is certainly trying to encourage people to get into that space. So it's something to look at. So, if you are going on a mobility journey, have a look at that as well. We'll leave it there, because there's a whole bunch of other stuff we talk about that I will need another hour. So, which I love to do, but anyway. Cool. Yeah, if you have any questions, come and give me a yell, okay? Actually, we've got 2 seconds for questions if anybody's got any. Yep. Yeah. Might as well.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
So once you've gone sort of on local and you created your iOS project or your Xcode project, can you just go back, or is it basically a one-way street?
Once you So once you built the app through the SDK, it's built. So if you that said, there's not a lot of reasons that you would need to rebuild it. One of the reasons you need to rebuild is if you've created a framework you want to include, like a custom control. There really isn't like things like adding. So any assets like icons can be included through. Actually, no, you've got to build if you got to. Sorry, let me go back. Assets you have to do during the build as well. So icons, that sort of stuff. Things like theme changes it supports. Not less. The other one. What's the? So go again. Whatever the iOS theme is, I can't think what it is now. It's not, but it has. So the MDK sort of uses less for just theming things up, but you can actually drop. It's NSS. Is that what you said? NSS. There's a couple of different ways, but you can specifically stylize some of the iOS as well. But once you've built it, So unless you're not going to actually change the code in the app, because most of the code in the app is all about the bridge between the JavaScript and the app itself, and obviously dealing with it. And it bundles in the iOS SDK frameworks and all that sort of stuff. So yeah.
So if I want to use the visual editor to create some more pages, I would do it in the web ID, but then copy.
I find that easy. So if I'm just trying to add in a control, I just want to see what it looks like. I generally just paste it in, and you can from the web IDE, you can go and say show code, and then I can steal the code. And you can do a certain amount likely. The other one is if you're doing something major, obviously Git. So you just put the thing on a Git project and you Git up and Git down. So just keep,
Okay.
Yeah. So I can commit this one to Git and then go to VS Code and pull it down, and then I just go backwards and forwards. So one of the reasons why this project will change if you update your metadata. So you can now do that through the VS Code extension, but we've got multi-factor at my site, and it doesn't support multi-factor so I couldn't get the data down. So do it here and then replicate it down through Git. So Cool.
So when you logged in the app,
Yep.
you your own ID from SAP.
Yep.
And I guess if you want to use your internal employees,
Yep.
you use the IDP.
Yep. And that works absolutely spot on.
If you have an app for, let's say, certain customers, how
Yep.
does that work?
Okay, yeah, interesting. So the trust itself can be set up at the cloud platform level. So if you've got an Azure AD that you're using for customers, so maybe an external, I don't know what you're using for identity, but if you've got an identity that can be trusted by the cloud platform, that can be used by the mobile services for its identity. So client at the moment, internally we use Microsoft, so Microsoft AD, so all the mobile applications get challenged and through. But for external, we've got some drivers using the app externally, and for that we're using the SAP identity product. So that's where, so what happens with that is that they're taking the username, and then if it's the client's username, it gets redirected to Azure. Otherwise, it's done by SAP. So as long as you can set up that trust, the trust is a sub-account level. So I should say that. So when you create a sub-account in the cloud platform, you set up a trust. So when the app is then deployed to the mobile services in that sub-account, the trust that you've established there is the IDP that's being used. So if whatever you're using for your externals, that's where you can put the users and do the user registration. Things like the cloud platform, the identity, so the SAP identity supports things like self-registration. That can be supported through the mobile app, because all the mobile app's going to do is redirect to the trust, and you're going to get a pop-up saying, do you want to register? And you go through that process, and then it'll reply back with a token and let you in the door. So you can do some cool stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, if there's some trust or identity that SAP doesn't know how to work with or something, you've probably got a different problem. But it's generally going at the cloud platform level rather than coding in the app itself. The other thing that we are not concerned about, but something that's come up recently is, particularly with shared devices, is multi-users on the device, and that's a different sort of issue. But Android apps seem to deal with that well because that's an Android feature, whereas iOS is generally a one-user device. So that's just to throw that one out there.